good morning, good morning. Yes, we're here again every morning, just like that, except for Shabbat, to talk about the wandering Jew and the practicing Jew, the practicing Jew and the wandering Jew, the difference between the two. How did we get here like this? What happened over the past thousands upon thousands of years that would create the gap, the divide between the practicing Jew and the wandering Jew? Well, that's what we hope to discuss. That's what we hope to discover. That's what we hope to talk about here with you who happen to be practicing Jews and wandering Jews and all the like in between. I think the Rabbi determined that he wished to close that gap completely, to awaken the spirit of Yiddishkeit worldwide. And with that, the Chabad houses that he formed with his incredible team of shluchim and rebbitzin throughout the world, over 4,000 of them throughout the world, reaching out to the community, to people just like me, people just like you, to say, join us, listen to us, hear us, listen to what God says to us and has said from the very beginning of us. And that's why we're the chosen people. So Rabbi Levi Cunin, how are you this morning?
Good morning, Rabbi. I'm doing well. And it's good to be here. It's good to see you. And I'm praying that everybody's well.
What is that beeping sound?
Somebody's sending me a bunch of messages. It'll go away soon. They just keep on sending it to me, but I'm sure it'll go away.
Turn the sound off.
I did it today. I'm doing it from my phone as opposed to my computer, which the camera is not working, or my other computer, which...
Oh my goodness.
So here we are. But it'll be okay. I don't anticipate much of
it. Wonderful. Well, Levi Cunin, what do you have to share with us today?
Well, you know, we're in the days, literally almost a week before the anniversary of the 10 Commandments event. And for most people, when they hear 10 Commandments, they think about Charlton Heston, and they think about the movie of the 10 Commandments. And while it's interesting how, of course, that got the word out there, but the experience of the 10 Commandments is something that we deserve to teach ourselves, because we are part of that story that's been part of our story. And there are so many details of the event of the time of the 10 Commandments that are, for the most part, unknown to most people. Such important details, like the fact that 2.5 million of us were present when these wondrous, out of this world type of events occurred right here on planet Earth. And it's something that every single year since then, for the last 3,333 years, we've been, or a little bit, actually it's more than that, we've been taking the time, as the Torah has instructed us, to observe that special day, to reconnect with it, and not just reconnect with it as a historic event, but rather in the Torah itself, something that we actually repeat daily in our liturgy, in our prayers. We're meant to experience this event every year in a greater way than it was experienced when it first began. In other words, the very fact that it's happening again is not just a historic event, but it's a reemergence of the energy that occurred at the time of Mount Sinai. So it's a big deal, and it's a really big deal once one gets present to it, because in other words, what happened at Mount Sinai, as the teachings of the Torah tell us, that the decree between the separation of heaven and earth came to a screeching halt. In other words, up until that moment, humanity and the creatures, any creature, was incapable of making a union with source. Longer conversation. But the Torah and the giving of the Torah and all of the events that surrounded the giving of the Torah were about breaking that barrier, giving you and me and all of us the possibility to reconnect to who we are, not from the way that we see ourselves as physical beings, but who we really are from a much deeper perspective, and for it to be authentically connected, meaning not just something that we put together in our imagination, but be able to experience it and to feel it. That's the greatness of the event of that which is coming up in a week from now.
Well, thank you, Levi. Let me ask you a wandering Jew question. I've asked this before, I believe, but I've never gotten a satisfactory answer. Where did the number 2.5 million come from?
If you look at this week's Torah portion, as we discussed, every week we read a different part of the Torah. And we are reading this week about the book of Numbers, which counted a certain segment of the Jewish people. For most of them,
that again,
the Torah counts a certain segment of the Jewish people. And in that counting, it goes into nitty-gritty detail. And the number that is there is for counting only men between ages of 20 and 60. Longer conversation why. But the number there is 600,000+ people. So if you just do the math, count the children and the women and the elderly, it's very easy to see why that number is the number. The percentage of which it would be put into perspective in terms of the men who were between 20 and 60 being counted at over 600,000. Make sense?
I hear that, and I'm having difficulty hearing you, but I'm going to accept it for now, simply because it sounds reasonable.
Okay.
So let's leave it at that. Let us, however, go into then the two things that have been said. That Torah was delivered at Mount Sinai, and the 10 Commandments were delivered at Mount Sinai. My understanding is that Torah was not delivered at Mount Sinai. The 10 Commandments were delivered at Mount Sinai. Would you please correct me on that?
So technically you're correct. But what that means is at Mount Sinai, what we heard and experienced was the 10 Commandments. But along with the 10 Commandments, that's the initiation of the entire Torah. So if you look at it, so to speak, as the 10 Commandments and the event at Mount Sinai being the seed that captures everything that will be in the tree. Indeed, our sages tell us that the entirety of all of the 613 commandments, mitzvot of the Torah, are actually included in the first two of the 10 Commandments. The first of which Hashem is saying, I am Hashem, your God, and I've taken you out of Egypt. And that, in that commandment, denotes our responsibility to be proactive in our relationship with Hashem. So therefore, all of the mitzvot that emerge in the teachings of the Torah are all included in, well, if you accept that I am God, your God, then here's what you got to do. And then there's the other second commandment, which says you should have no other gods before me. And that denotes all of the passive commandments, the places that the Torah tells us not to do. So when the Torah tells us not to do something, it's a derivative of don't have any other gods, not other entities that we call gods, but any other force that governs us. So therefore, when we practice restriction in those areas, we're adhering to that second commandment. But it doesn't get manifest at that time as we know it today in the Torah. That happens later. But as our sages say, the entirety of the Torah was given to Moses at Mount Sinai, at that event. As difficult as it may be for us to really wrap our minds around that at first, but over time when we read about it, it kind of makes more sense, you know?
But what you're saying, and pardon my continuous question about this, you're saying that the entirety of the Torah was presumptively delivered at Mount Sinai in the Ten Commandments, but not literally delivered at Mount Sinai.
Well, let me just put it this way. I'll just use your business, your how you approach, business consulting from some perspective that I'm aware of, right? So first you have the entirety of the dream of what you're looking for, right? And in that dream, do you have when the person the entrepreneur came up with their business idea, the person, let's say Starbucks. So at that moment, the entire Starbucks existed in his mind. But did he know what color cups he was yet going to use? No, but it will all be consistent with what he saw if he's going to be authentic to his vision. It'll all be consistent with what he saw at that original moment. So, and therefore, at a certain level, that original moment, number one, the entirety of the event, which will eventually unfold and emerge as a business, could be traced back to that moment of the epiphany of that business. Now, I'm saying over here, it's even more so. Not just that the entirety of what emerges from the Torah is rooted in the Ten Commandments, but actually, if you remember the movie The Matrix, I know it's been in the news lately, but in the movie The Matrix, fascinating movie. I think it's based on Kabbalah, but that's a longer conversation. In the movie The Matrix, the person gets a download of information and within a second becomes a master of the language. In our minds, we can't imagine that, because for us to learn something, we have to go through this entire process. But remember that part of the Torah, and this is another big one, is not just the written Torah, the 5 books of Moses, but is the oral Torah, which was instructed within the written Torah to accompany the written Torah. In other words, the written Torah, in a certain sense, is incomplete without those oral teachings that we have that were authenticated from generation to generation. So in our oral Torah is where we learn that when Moses came down, Moses, he communicated in the formula as he was told to do so, to teach the people in a certain formula, a certain system, but he communicated to them about the fact that he had received the Torah, and that was what he would be giving. They already experienced themselves the divine revelation in a powerful way, but the actual words and messages of the Torah, most of which won't come into manifestation in letters and words until over the next 40 years.
And I'll say again, but Levi, if I'm literal, then what was delivered at Mount Sinai was the Ten Commandments.
Correct.
You can draw whatever spiritual conclusion you draw from that. And in all the conversations that Jewish people have had since Mount Sinai, and all of the events that have occurred since Mount Sinai, and all of the conjecture that's been created since Mount Sinai, and all of the arguments and conversations that have been had since Mount Sinai, the oral Torah, the written Torah, has followed the history of the Jewish people, the history of the world, the history of our relationship with Hashem. All of that has emerged from that moment not been extant at that moment,
Correct.
essentially you're saying it was.
Yeah, I mean, listen. All I can say is the following: is that it's a one of the things that I've come to appreciate, and I actually learned from the Torah, but it's about anything. Is there's whatever we're thinking about, and then there's a context in which we're thinking about whatever we're thinking about, and then there's a way we create that context in which we're thinking about whatever we're thinking about. So there are different rooms, so to speak. We don't think about these things. So when we consider things, we don't think about these things. I'll just give you a simple example, right? You know, imagine a question, actually a great story. I may have told this one to you, but a great story about a woman who comes to a rabbi before Passover, the day before Passover, asks the rabbi if it's kosher for her to use 4 glasses of milk for her Seder instead of 4 glasses of wine. And the rabbi said, let me look into it, and I'll get back to you. And as soon as she left, he told his student he should go to the store and he should get a whole entire order of whatever that family needs, including as much as wine as they need for the Seder. So the student asked, like, what happened? He said to the student, he said, you think she was asking because she doesn't want to use wine? Obviously, she can't afford wine. And which was the case. So suddenly the question that was asked him, is it kosher to use the milk, is put into a whole new different context. You understand what I'm saying?
I understand.
So when we consider the events of Mount Sinai, we have to be careful not to try to think of it in the context of how we usually think. Because these are unusual events. They're not events that ever occurred again. They're one-time events. They occur every year, but not the way that they occurred in that revealed way then. So a great deal went on. Part of which, just imagine if for a split second, you lost any feeling in a physical feeling of your body. You could put your hand through your body. Just imagine for a second, for a split second, or just a few seconds, you could see all of the atoms and the molecular structure of your being, and you don't even see your face as you see it. It may freak you out, you know? But the point is that what they saw at Mount Sinai was that energy of the divine contracted energy that produces the reality that we're in suddenly became unveiled. They couldn't handle it. It was impossible, because to be individual physical human beings, we can't be present at that level of who we are, because then it just changes our entire who we are. So that was the event that occurred where, and another way to put it is, that was the moment where heaven and earth were seen in a way that it's never been seen ever before. For human beings to be able to experience, for that short period of time, our true story in a way that is perhaps not even describable. But it's something that was witnessed by 2.5 million people in live. Go ahead.
Seen by whom?
2.5 million of our ancestors.
Okay.
Seen and experienced. Meaning.
No, I hear you. I hear you. Okay, we'll come back to that, Levi. Okay. We'll come back to that. Our time is up. Can you believe that?
It happens all the time.
A delight seeing you this morning. I'll see you tomorrow morning.
Okay.
Everybody, I'll see you all tomorrow morning as well. If you engage in this conversation, if you deeply engage in this conversation, something will happen that's never happened before. At least that's what we expect will happen. Something that's never happened before. Baruch Hashem. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.